Thank you for listening to Remake Rewind, the podcast where we decide if remakes or reboots should have happened. I'm Mike, as always. With me, I've got my two co-hosts. I've got Double D, a.k.a. David. How you doing?
Oh, hey, that's me. Hey, what's up, Mike?
I'm sick, but I'm recording this podcast because it has to happen.
Oh, it does have to happen.
We've got our other co-host, Alice.
No.
Someone actually called him that at work.
I know, that's why we...
Oh, no.
That's why we call him that now. You told me that last
great.
episode.
No, I know, but that actually happened because of the podcast. Because of last episode, someone else called him
somebody
Alice.
listened and then decided to call him Alice.
Yep.
Oh, good.
At
So we
first,
know somebody's
I thought,
listening.
It didn't click. I was like, is he just saying my name wrong? And they kept saying
Nope,
it
he's a listener.
over and over. I was like, God damn it.
That's great. Well, you said you wanted a nickname, and you got one, Alex. I'm sorry, Alice.
You brought this upon yourself.
I didn't tell the story.
All right.
Yeah, but you asked for a nickname.
He did. He really did.
If only we had a time machine.
Oh, nice segue into what we're covering. What are we talking about this week?
The time machine.
So yeah, we're watching two versions of the Time Machine from 1960 starring Rod Taylor, and then the 2002 remake starring Guy Pearce and Samantha Mumba. I don't know if you guys remember who that is, but
Samantha Bumba.
yeah, she had a couple hits in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then did this movie and we never heard of her again.
Maybe she got stuck in the future.
I really don't remember.
And have you guys seen either of these movies before?
Yes, I have actually seen the 2002 Time Machine, which is the newer one, but never the 1960.
Yeah,
Same.
same with me. I never saw the original. The 2002 came out before I worked at the movie theater, so we'd only go and see like 2 or 3 movies a year, if even that. And that was one that I saw in theaters, and my dad really liked it. I actually really liked the movie back in the day, and I've seen it maybe 1 or 2 more times since 2002, so I'm going into this pretty open with my expectations.
Yeah, likewise. I do recall liking the 2002 version when I did see it. I've seen parts of it here and there on TV, but I've never rewatched the whole thing like this time again.
What about you, Alex?
It's the same. Like I think I was 12 at the time when I saw it. I liked it. I think I remember having like a crush on the girl.
Samantha Mumba?
Is that? Oh, that's Samantha Mumba. Okay.
In the
the
remake, yeah, it's Samantha Mumba. She's an Irish pop star.
Yeah.
So none of us have seen the original 1960.
No, I've never saw it, but I do know that one of the actors in the original, the guy who plays Thilby, he does have a cameo in the new one as the guy who owns the flower shop.
I did notice that.
So there's a small tie, not very many, but there are a couple, and I think we should just get into it. What say you guys?
I say I have a synopsis for it.
Summarize it, bro.
So I'm going to summarize
do it,
right
bro.
now. Well, this is actually from John Vogel. I'm not going to summarize it. I'm going to read John Vogel's summarization. From the book by H.G. Wells, a scientist and tinkerer builds a time machine and uses it to explore the distant future where there are 2 races, a mild, gentle race and a cannibalistic one living underground. His machine is stolen by the underground race, and he must risk being captured and eaten to return to his own time.
Yeah, it's the Aryan race and the Morlocks.
The Aryan race.
That's exactly what it was. I was really thinking about that like half of the time. I was like, shouldn't they have like dark
No,
hair?
they all are blonde and blue-eyed and super sexy.
I mean, super boring.
What's weird is, so the main love interest, which is still, I mean, all these movies where somebody travels to like another planet or a distant time or distant country or whatever, and they meet somebody, like he's there for a matter of hours, and then he gets like semi-romantically involved with this woman who is, don't get me wrong, is a very pretty girl. Turns out she was underage for most of this filming of this movie.
Wait, really? Well,
yeah, she turned.
Well, he also kept calling her a pretty
He calls
girl.
her like a child, and he's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
where's
it's
your
weird.
where's the adults and stuff?"
Yeah, she's like, I don't understand. But yeah, she was
Creepy.
under 18 and was not allowed to work full shooting days. And she turned 18, and this was like her first movie. She turned 18 in the middle of production, And then they went back and reshot a lot of her stuff at the beginning because apparently she got better at acting as it went on. Although there wasn't much for her to do.
Because she turned 18.
Yeah,
which is
it
completely
comes of
next
age.
level.
Right. So we already established that neither of us saw this movie. But what are some highlights for you guys on this film?
Highlights or lowlights?
Highlights. Like what I said.
Oh, that's tougher to think about. Okay, let me. I actually like the acting in the beginning of the movie, like that whole setup of him going into the time machine.
I like that he built a tiny miniature version
Functional
of the
miniature.
fucking time machine.
So yeah, let's talk about that miniature for a second. So like, to set the scene, basically in a nutshell, and like honestly, when the movie came back, like when he comes back to the past after going to the future, I thought there was gonna be like a time loop in here, but I was wrong. But basically, in a nutshell, he has 4 of his like aristocratic friends waiting for him for dinner, and he shows up and he's all disheveled and he's got dirty clothing and everything, and he's like, "Hey guys, totally made a time machine. Here's my proof." And he pulls out this like beautifully ornate box that clearly was built just for the reveal of this little tiny time machine, and it's like the size of I don't even know, like a large candle. Like it's not a very big thing. It was probably, I don't know, like
Oh, the time machine
6 to 8
itself?
inches across.
It's big enough to fit a cigar.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing that's funny. He's like describing. He's like, you just sit in the chair
He
and
fucking
let me see
takes
that.
the
He takes a cigar and he bends a cigar with like 2, bends in it. Like somebody can't imagine how you sit in a chair. And then he
He's got to have a
turns
person there.
this time machine on, which honestly is incredibly impressive that he made not only a full-size functional time machine, but a fully functional
machine.
miniature one, because most of the time, even today, you build something and then you spend decades trying to miniaturize it, and he did that right away.
I
But he
feel
does
like
this.
he did it backwards, but like it's like it's essentially like someone built a tiny car and then made it a giant car.
That's exactly what it is. Actually.
So he builds a functioning mini time machine, like a 1/6 scale hot toy time machine.
Can we talk about the box it was in? I really
Yeah,
like that
that's what I was
box
saying. It
that
was
he
like a
revealed it
he
in.
built it. He had to go to like a carpenter and an upholsterer to get this like ornate box made for the reveal of his tiny time machine.
And they just laughed at him.
Yeah, well, but the thing that's ridiculous is he makes a thing. He goes, "I need to have a witness because I'm gonna lose my model." And they're like, "What?" So he like does a demonstration and he sends the time machine into the future, this little tiny desktop one, and they're like, "Oh my god!" And they're just like, "Oh, you made it disappear." He's like, "No, it's in the future," and they're like, "You're an idiot." And it's like, why would you not why not? No. Let me compose myself before I say this because I'm getting frantic. But why, coming from somebody who's seen Back to the Future over and over and over again, I've seen that so many times.
So many times.
Doc Brown does it right. He sends the dog and the DeLorean 1 minute into the future.
No, well, he had no timer to put it on.
Yeah,
He can
it's
only
like
put
it's
40.
only a
So
lever.
it's still traveling.
It's essentially yeah.
So yeah, this whole time machine has a very weird mechanism in that you don't just punch in, you don't just punch in a date and go. It's literally just forward and backwards, and then when you're ready to stop, you literally just have to crank the handle back.
The only qualm I had about both time machines, in fact, like, why do they vanish? Why do they not just stay in that time?
He actually explained
They're
that.
always occupying that space, aren't they?
You're like, yeah, things can affect it, but it doesn't affect the space.
Yeah, that's the thing that's a little weird. So yeah, he explains like where did it go? And he explains that, well, it's occupying the same space, but not in this time, because it kind of, at least it's consistent. Now, coming from watching like Avengers Endgame, and we did Back to the Future on Ruin My Childhood just, about a month and a half ago. So I've actually been watching a decent amount of time travel shit lately. I've also been watching the Hulu series Future Man, so lots of time travel stuff
Future
lately.
Man's so good.
At least they're consistent with this, where like when he goes to the future, he doesn't risk running into himself because he never was in the future, because in the present he started traveling. So like when he goes into the future, he pops up like 6 years later and sees, or no, he goes like 15 years in the future and he sees somebody who looks exactly like his friend Thilby, and it turns out it's his son. And he just finds out that, so everybody he knows he just disappeared. So, at least it's consistent. And that's the thing that if I'm watching a time travel movie, I just want some sort of consistency. Like, set your rules, establish your rules, and as long as you follow them, I can suspend my disbelief enough to watch this film. And so they at least did that. But
well, not the second movie, but we'll talk about that.
No. So, but at least this movie, it has the thing, and it kind of, there's a logic to it, and it actually almost kind of works with like Endgame time travel, where it's like, well, if you're traveling, that's your present, so you can't really affect other timelines because it's now your future past, blah, 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 blah. So if you're traveling to the future, well, you can't run into yourself because your future, you never lived it, kind of thing. So like, it kind of makes, there is a logic to it. But it is just stupid how he doesn't have like a thing where he can just set, oh, I'm going to go forward 3 days or 5 minutes. Because, he basically
just a lever.
Lost.
Just a
he just lost his toy. And everyone's just like, okay, idiot. Well, they're basically like, well, you disappeared something. You should go work for the military.
What?
And then he decides to go back. He just decides to go to the future. And I have to say, the special effects for this movie, I found to be quite charming.
Yeah, they're cool. The little miniature.
Yeah, so I mean, they did a lot of time lapse stuff. So you see actually like the sun going, like
A lot of
rising and falling, rising, falling. You see, it's a little creepy. This guy's like clearly does not have a healthy sexual lifestyle, because as he's time traveling, he's looking across the street and there's a mannequin in his window, and he's watching over as the years go by. So the first time he leaves the future, he only goes like an hour and a half. And then he goes again 17 years, and he's watching this mannequin get changed to all the different styles, and he's like, oh, the dresses, oh, they're so revealing. Women are really going to be wearing that in the future? And then he stops during World War I and finds out that, he disappeared. And then he gets back into the time machine, goes a little bit further. I think he goes to 1966. And then there's like an atomic bomb that drops, so he has to go back in. And then that's what ends up getting him fucked up.
Why was he okay there? Well, it was just one side of the street bombed, and where he was in the grass was fine.
Well, no, you saw that. Well, the thing that also didn't make sense about the bombs dropping is that it created volcanoes. They specifically say the explosions created volcanic activity, and then all of a sudden there's lava coming.
Yeah.
But then they had this really cool setup of miniatures. You just see like the ceiling, like the floor cracking, and you see lava bubbling up and burning stuff. But
yeah, but I mean the bomb obviously dropped, and the Philbies just caught on fire, and like the cars exploded, and they were immediately into dust. But he's just on the other side of the street, laying in the grass.
Well, and he looks at a mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
Like, he'd be blind and irradiated.
I didn't understand.
But I mean, that was kind of dumb. But I mean, the effects was cool of like the lava flowing through the street, seeing the cities get built and then fall, come back down, and all the different stuff. And then ultimately, because of the bomb, he gets buried, and then it becomes into a cave, and then it takes millions of years, like 800,000 years or something like that in this one, before he is able to have erosion. And he even talks about it. Like, he has this little commentary, and he's just like, oh, I'm still looking at this woman. Like, he like beat off to this mannequin while he's just like waiting for the cave to collapse. But then he's like, oh, I have to wait for erosion and wind and water to wear down the cave. And then he comes out like 800,000 years in the future.
Wouldn't it be smarter if he just like, oh, this happened? Okay, let me go back time
Yeah,
machine to a different location and then go forward.
Well, not in a different location, different time. It doesn't travel in space.
No, he just moves it out of the time machine out of the
He
cave.
should have put wheels on it.
Or he could have just gone back to his time.
Yeah.
Like, and then done that. Then moved it. Like any number of things, but he didn't need to go 800,000 years in the future.
Also, why did the temperature outside affect the air in the time machine? That didn't.
Yeah, I don't know.
That was both movies too.
Yeah, and that kind of goes with what you were saying. Like, why does it disappear? Because it is occupying the same space. Like they say, like he even explains, it's occupying the same space, just not in this time.
Just at a different time. But technically, since it's traveling through time, it should be there the entire time.
Right. Unless it's supposed to be while it's moving. So that is a little interesting. I'm not really sure how to explain that one.
Thank you. Stumped.
Yeah, I guess that doesn't really make sense with what he said because they're, at the beginning of the movie when he has those 4 guys over, he mentions that, this is only traveling in time and it's not present in this instance. That's why you don't see it. It is here, but not in this time because I'm traversing the 4th dimension. And one guy's like, what 4th dimension? What are you talking about? What are the other 3? And this one guy scoffs. He's like, you idiot.
Surely
Aren't
you've
you
gone to
educated? And the guy's like, fine, then you explain. And then he actually explains the first 3 dimensions
He does it,
adequately.
yeah, pretty well. The X,
Yeah,
Y,
he
Z.
does. Yeah, exactly. So he explains it. So there is still a logic to this movie. But yeah, I really don't understand the cold thing. But eventually he ends up, while he's like traversing through time, he explains like, I got a pretty good feel for it. Like I could actually move, minutes and hours or days or weeks or months or years with, very little margin of error or something like that. He also has a comment. He's like, I began to grow fond of the mannequin across the street, my ageless girlfriend or something like that.
Yeah.
Like
We
super
both
weird.
don't age or something.
Yeah. And so then ultimately he, like we've already talked about, he gets stuck and he decides to go into the future, even though the more obvious solution is to go into the past. But he goes to the future and immediately sees all these hot blondes and there's this girl swimming and nobody's helping her. It's like she's drowning in the river and everyone's just kind of watching. And he's like, you fuckers, what are you doing? And so he like saves the girl and then he immediately is kind of like creeping on her a little bit, like touching her face and like, oh
but
man.
before that, what I also like, it's like she's just like clawing at this rock, just like,
At the rock.
And then like 2
Yeah, but
guys
the
are
2
just
guys
staring at
sitting
her.
on top of
Yeah, they're just watching.
Yeah, they're like,
And
yeah.
well, I mean, he screams at everyone like, "What are you doing, you monsters?"
No one
And then
cares.
they just like all get up and leave and go to the cafeteria. And what's weird is while he's walking through the woods or the jungle before he actually stumbles upon the crew, he's just like, "Oh, this is amazing! Humans have completely figured out how to control nature." How do you know that?
By the
You
size
don't
of
know
the fruit,
anything
I
about
think.
what's going on.
He was like, oh, they've cultivated like large fruit.
Yeah, it's like, no, that doesn't mean that they've done any of these things. Especially when you figure out how stupid these people actually are. So then he like goes to like has lunch with everybody,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Oh, tell me about your laws and your government," and everyone's just ignoring him. And finally, one of them's just like, "You ask a lot of questions." He goes, "Yeah, that's how you learn." And it turns out they don't have laws. They don't work. He's like, "Oh, that's amazing. Your guys' economy is so perfect and self-sustaining that all you have time for is doing scientific experiments at your leisure." Kind of thing. It's like, okay. And then they're like, "Yeah, you can stop talking now." And then he goes and asks for books so he can learn. And then all the books crumble in his hands. And then he
And he's,
just
like,
decides
serious.
he just decides to go back out into the dark. And Weena, who's the blonde that he kind of is like creeping on, she's like, "Yeah, you should probably go back inside because the Morlocks will show up." And sure enough, like Morlocks show up and he happens to light a match and they like freak the fuck out. And they end up just like spending the night there because he realized his time machine got taken. Like you can see track marks, which is convenient.
They also just left inside the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the equivalent of like when you have like something delivered from like a furniture company or whatever, and you're just like, "I'm not gonna get to it. Just leave it by the door," kind of thing. They just leave it just inside the door, or it's like shoes, like you just leave your shoes just inside. And the next day, there's like a siren that's like the same siren as when the nuke was dropping, and everybody just starts like walking to the entrance, and like just dozens of them just walk in, and then it shuts, and he's just like, "What are you guys doing?" And they're like, "Oh, we're just supposed to do this." Like, why? I don't know. It's what we do.
The funny thing is, like, I thought it was like a trance, but like he was like, that's in the past. You don't have to do the air raids anymore. It doesn't mean anything.
All clear. And it's like, yeah, but it's like it's been 800,000 years. You have no context. Like he thinks he knows everything based off observations that mean nothing. So yeah, he honestly thinks it's like a residual, just kind of instinct to go underground because you hear a siren. It's like, well, no, they have been trained to go there because that's what the Morlocks do. So we find out that the Morlocks, which are, we haven't really seen them in great detail yet, but they're essentially shirtless men painted green with buck-tooth
green?
Well,
masks.
it's blue.
It's like a greenish, like a turquoise.
Whatever it was terrible.
Right.
Because you
But you
can
find-
see
so-
the paint smear in one of the fight
Yeah, whenever
scenes.
he like
Yeah.
grabbed
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things that are a little weird with these things. So they also have glowing eyes.
Oh yeah.
But he decides to go down to rescue Weena. And he's like, you guys need to fight back. So he like goes into the Morlock cave. And then as soon as he sees Weena, he just like goes and runs for her. And then they start whipping him. And he just starts like punching them. Like Indiana
They're
Jones
dying.
style.
They're like literally dying.
They're dying,
from
like,
the
yeah, they
hits.
like, you see the lights, like some of them will fall down and
Yeah.
then you see the lights fade from their eyes, but then they just start whipping the shit out of them until he thinks to like light a match. He lights the match and they freak out, and then he like lights a torch and they all just kind of surround him, and he just is fucking decking them left and right over and
He
over and
kicks
over
one
again.
into a rock and it just fucking like it almost explodes. Like
Well, he
it's just
picks one
dripping
up at
blood.
one point, like over his head, and chucks it.
No sense.
And then as he's about to get overwhelmed again, the one guy just like, you see him like struggling to clench a fist, and then he fights back.
He's
and
like,
then
let me see how I can make this fist.
Right. And so they all
then-
kind of like fight back, but then they decide to like light. Just he sees this like pipe that's like oozing some fluid,
guess, like,
and he's just like, he throws his torch on it, and like the entire cave just ignites. And then you
Obviously
see
gasoline.
Right. So then you see this one Morlock catch on fire, and it's, a fire stunt where, a man's walking around, and normally what they do is they put you in like really heavy clothing and light that shit on fire before dousing. But you can clearly see that the guy went from not wearing a shirt to like wearing like a burlap sack
Painted blue.
painted blue. So like it didn't look like any of the other Morlocks, but same thing. Like they're just dying as people are punching them. Like they're not that strong, which is super weird. And then they all just, get out of the cave and everything's good. And he's just kind of like
Well,
caressing Weena.
I also like that he's like, hey, everyone, throw shit down there. All the,
That's right.
all
Throw
the
everything
wood.
down the wells, and then so that way we'll light the whole thing on fire. And they specifically mention, oh no, that's the other one. Never mind. But yeah, they're just like throwing everything down and lighting it on fire, and then magically the door opens. He's like talking to Weena, and he's just like, I don't know about this place. I don't know if I'll ever fit in. But then she's just like, oh, tell me about your time. Would I be pretty there? And he's like, yeah, you would. And he's being all creepy. And then the door, for whatever reason, just opens up, and his time machine's just sitting there right inside the door, about 10 feet away from where he left it. And
has
so
to
he
fight
goes
more
in.
Morlocks.
Yeah, well, so he goes in. He's like, Weena, come here. And he just got done explaining why she shouldn't go back in time, that she won't understand everything. It's like, she's already simple. Like, she's a very simple person. Like, she'd be totally fine going back in time. But the door slams. He goes back. He fights a couple Morlocks, ends up going back in time to his original time. And this is where I thought, oh, this is like a loop, because his clothes get all destroyed because he was in the fire. It's all burned. His sleeve is torn, because when he showed up at the beginning of the movie, his clothes were all burned and torn and everything. I'm like, oh, he went back just a little too far in the past, kind of thing. But that's not the case. Like, he just goes back and he's having dinner with all his friends and he tells the whole story, and they're just like, you fucking idiot. Why are you lying? Kind of thing. And then he pulls out a flower, and he's like, here's my proof.
Here's my proof.
this
Well, look at this
And
flower.
all the friends are like, peesh posh, and they like walk away. And like Thilby is like, I believe you,
Nothing
kind of thing.
can bloom in the winter.
Yeah. So then he goes to leave, and he just decides to go back and check on the time traveler George, and then he sees like the tracks. So what ended up happening is he pulled the time machine back so that way he can go back to the future and be in the space that's not behind the door. And he just kind of disappears, and we're supposed to assume that he went back to the future. And he only took like 3 books, and they make this big thing like, why would he go back to the future without like a plan? Like, he's going to rebuild society. but he doesn't have a plan. And then his housemaid, I don't know what they're actually called. She's like, oh, look, he took some books. Like, which 3? She's like, I don't know, kind of thing. He's like, well, which books would you take? She's like, I don't know. But yeah, he just leaves. And he's like, well, I hope he's happy. Like, this guy's a creep.
Yeah, it was weird.
Like, he's more than double everybody's age. And he's just going to go there and, like, disrupt the pure blood Aryan nation.
He was kind of a dick. Just, like, trashing their colony, their, like, existence. Like, what are you guys even alive for? It's just, what the fuck, dude? You go back to your own time.
I mean, he's kind of, like, I kind of get it. Because, I mean, obviously they
too.
were brainwashed into just, they hadn't had like a dystopian utopia kind of thing, which I know is an oxymoron, but
I get it.
they kind of, it's like they can do whatever they want. Like they just have a life of leisure. And he actually comments on it where he goes, before he went back to the past and then came back, he says something along the lines where he's narrating his story and he goes, we actually collapsed there with the Morlocks gone. They're no longer going to be able to live their life of leisure. They're now going to have to work and figure out a way to govern themselves. The kind of thing. It's like, you destroyed this world's like economy, the entire society. Like these are everybody here is super simple. They're not capable of critical thought. They're not capable of communication.
They don't even know how to gather food because you like in the beginning he's like, how do you get food? They're like,
I don't know.
They're like, it just shows up. Where do you get your clothes? It just shows up, kind of thing. So it's like, yeah, these guys, like he's basically set himself up to become like a dictator.
Wait,
like
so where do they get their clothes?
The Morlocks. They explain that the Morlocks provide
don't
them.
wear clothes.
They have like
Yeah, the Morlocks don't wear the clothes because
skirts.
they are used to the underground. But the people who live above the ground need the clothing because they're white, and white people get sunburned.
Which also still didn't make sense to me.
Well, they mentioned that they breed them.
Oh, they breed the white folks because they taste better.
Yeah, we got that light meat,
Damn it.
like on Thanksgiving. To the
That's what I
turkey.
go for.
Do you want the light meat or the dark meat?
I'm going for the light meat every
I
time.
always get
Yeah,
that
man.
Light meat with extra gravy.
But yeah, this guy like destroyed their civilization and is going back, assuming he knows better. In reality, it's like your society didn't really work out, as we know, and you think you're gonna, and you just only saw it from like the glimpse of one window. You don't know anything about where humanity went wrong, and you think you're gonna fix it. Fuck you.
Yeah, I think I liked everything about this movie until we met the Morlocks, and then it just went all downhill.
I like the
Yeah,
Morlocks.
it became a little weird. Like the Morlocks just being able to be fought. Like he's able to.
So easily.
Well, and also the thing is, it's like he's supposed to be just a scientist, dude,
Yeah.
right? And I know he's Rod Taylor, but like he's a really good fighter for like a 60s movie. Like he's just fighting like these alien creatures to him. Yeah, he's just punching and fighting and kicking and everything, and he's like whooping all kinds of ass. There's a point where he grabs a whip and starts like
When he
whipping
starts
them
whipping
too,
them, yeah.
and he just knows how to use a whip really well. I mean, we do know he's into some weird sexual shit, so maybe that's where he picked up the whipping. But yeah, it's a weird movie. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. And I thought, it's a little hokey, but I thought all the time-lapse photography they did for the time travel, I thought was really cool and really clever.
Yeah, I agree with you.
It was charming. It was definitely worth a watch. This movie was only like 94 minutes.
Yeah.
It was short. So
Well done for a movie from 1960.
yeah, absolutely. I think it won a special.
It won
I
an
think it won an
Oscar.
Academy Award for special effects.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I enjoyed it. Anything else you guys want to go over before we move to the new one?
Nah.
I don't think so. Philby was a great guy.
Yeah, Philby was a great friend. That's the kind of guy you want on your team.
Doesn't
Wish I had a Philby.
nothing blooms in winter.
Well, and his whole thing was like, his friend just disappears, and he was the executor of the will because George. So the character's name is H. George Wells, so H.G. Wells.
Right.
Apparently, when this first came out, they only referred to him as the time traveler, but they clearly call him George a couple of times in the movie.
Times.
But George disappears, and he refuses to sell the house. And then by the time you get into like 1960, the house is gone, but he created a park, and the son, Philby's son, who like created the park, he goes, "This park is dedicated to my dad, who never gave up on his friend," kind of thing. Like Thilby never sold George's house. It was like the son who did it, and then he created a park. Like, the Thilby family is just full of good dudes.
Yep.
Well, and then like when you go, I'm sorry. So in 1960, when the bombs are dropping, he sees old man Thilby, but it's old man. It's his son, and the son remembers him. He's like, "Holy shit, it's you, and you haven't aged a day.
Your clothes.
Your clothes are the same. This is the exact same spot. Holy shit!" But I thought that part was pretty cool. Like, on the whole, for a 1960s movie, I thought this was about as good as you can get.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
For watching it in 2019.
I just wish there were more to the Morlocks.
Yeah, they're a little simple.
Just like the Eloys.
All right, well, let's
Check
move
it
to the
too.
other one.
All right.
The Eloy.
Oh, but you know what? Really quick. This is based off a novella by H.G. Wells. And novellas are like books. And you know what else are like books?
Novellas.
Audiobooks.
Audible.
Audible.
Can you get novellas on audio?
You can, I think. But either way,
so,
go to audibletrial.com/MDXpods, get a free 30-day trial and a free book on us.
Hey.
audibletrial.com/MDXpods. All right, go ahead and do your synopsis, Alice.
God damn it. This is from Simon.
Don't you take the Lord's name in vain, you bitch.
Gosh darn it.
That's better.
This is from Simon. Alexander Hardingen is a scientist and an inventor who is determined to prove that time travel is possible. When the girl he loves is tragically killed, Alexander is determined to go back in time and change the path. Testing his theories, the time machine is hurled 800,000 years into the future. He discovers a terrifying new world. Instead of mankind being the hunter, they are now the hunted, with him stuck in the middle. And it's from Simon.
So, I do kind of like that they give him a backstory of why he decided to invent time travel.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
I mean, I thought it made sense in the first one, too, though.
Yeah,
like if I'm a scientist and I'm, like, obsessive about something and I have my mindset on something, I'm going to build it.
Right, no, I can get that, but, like, why time travel? Like, why? What was his practical application?
He wanted to send his friend
didn't really
Cigar
have
to
one.
the future, obviously.
He didn't really have anything in mind. He just, it's the conceit for the movie. It's fine. This one gives a little bit of structure, and this one's actually directed by the great-grandson of H.G. Wells.
Simon Wells.
Simon Wells, yeah, is the great-great-grandson of H.G.
That's
Wells.
the same Simon.
Oh, is it? Is that the one that you just read?
No.
It
Simon
just
Wells?
says Simon. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But this time around, so I mentioned that I've seen this movie a couple times and I liked it, but this time around I found a huge hole in the movie that
Please
fundamentally
share.
breaks the movie.
Do it.
So, basically, in a nutshell, his Sienna Guillory, his girlfriend Emma, gets mugged right when he proposes to her. So he decides to invent the time machine so he can go back and prevent it. So he goes back and prevents
The mug.
her from going to the park. But what ends up happening is on the original timeline, he goes and he's supposed to buy her flowers, but he gets distracted by an automobile. And the automobile breaks down, and then all of a sudden it lurches forward, and he grabs the emergency brake and locks it into place. Well, in timeline B, when he goes back into the past, because he didn't get distracted by the car and put the emergency brake on, when he goes to buy her flowers, like, he goes and stops her from going to the park, and he's like, go home. Like, I know this sounds crazy, but go home. I'll explain everything. Everything's going to be okay. And she's like, I'll go home after you buy me flowers. And he's like, all right, I'll buy you flowers. Wait right here. Well, she's waiting right in front of the car that breaks down and then lurches forward and kills her. And he's just like, immediately, he doesn't try to go back in time and fix it again.
Nope.
He's just like,
she's going to die every time.
she's like, I could be here thousands of times over and over again. And he's explaining this all to Robert Baratheon. So Robert Baratheon plays Thilby this time.
I knew it.
He explains it, and Thilby is like, what the fuck are you talking about, Guy Pearce? I have no idea what you're talking about.
This isn't Momentum.
Yeah, and he goes, yeah, you got to explain everything to me from the beginning. But he's just like, yeah, that's not going to work. Like, I'm never going to be able to do this. I need to go to the future where, like, time travel's perfected, and I'm going to learn how to do this. So he, like, travels to, same thing, you see, like, time-lapse stuff, but ultimately shoots to, like, 2030, 2037 and everything, and he finds Orlando Jones as a
Little
that's the thing that dates this movie the
librarian,
most, is
or Orlando
Jones.
Jones dates it the most.
So his name is Vox, and he's an AI who has all human knowledge. He works at a public library, and he does this thing. Well, and this is the thing that's really weird about this movie. Guy Pearce's character, Alex, asks about time travel. He goes, "Oh, do you know physics?" He goes, "Yes." And he pulls out physics. It's like quantum fluctuations, blah, 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 blah. And like he names all this like technical jargon. And then Orlando Jones looks disappointed. He goes, "Time travel, changing to science fiction." And then he talks about H.G. Wells. He talks about the 1960s movie. So like within this universe, H.G. Wells exists. And the
He also talks
1960s
about
movie.
Alexander Hardigan.
Yeah. And they've mentioned that he is a, disgraced scientist who disappeared or some shit like that. And then in this universe, because this movie takes place on the first day is New Year's Eve in 1889, going into 1900. They mentioned that the original novella was written like 3 years before everything. So it's like, I guess you can say that maybe he read the novella by H.G. Wells, and that's how he got the idea, maybe.
That's why he started working on the time
Right.
machine.
So he's like, no, practical applications. Time travel's real. And Orlando Jones is like, use a bitch. Don't fucking waste my
He
time.
was pretty much a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he decides to go even further into the future. And then it turns out like we were setting up colonies on the moon. We accidentally blew up the moon, which caused
Whoops.
the world to get destroyed. So he goes, this time around, he accidentally gets knocked out. The time machine gets jostled right as he starts it. He gets knocked out. And he doesn't wake up until like 800,000 years in the future, right?
Yep.
So ultimately, and we'll get into more of the other stuff. Ultimately, these Morlocks are like scarier, gnarlier, but then there's also like super smart Morlocks, played by Jeremy Irons, and Jeremy Irons explains you can't change the past because if you save her, you would have never built the time machine. So he basically says it would be a paradox going back and changing the past, which okay, I can almost understand. Except he did change the past.
Well,
By not
he meant
he
that
changed-
outcome has to be the same
Yeah, he can't change the eventuality. He can change the instances
But
and
why?
how it happened. but
because
you can't
she
'Cause it's still
dies, and that's
changing.
what leads him to build that time
right.
machine.
And I know, but it's like the time travel thing. But it's like like I said earlier, I'm okay if they set rules in a time travel movie and they follow it. But in this particular case, like I don't think it's fair to set the rule without giving any explanation and then just being like, oh well, yeah, paradox, kind of thing. It's like. Then
yeah.
this movie just shows that there literally is no point to time travel.
I think that's
There
more
is-
the
I think
the problem with just the story, where that's his whole goal. That's just his driven force, is to figure it out. Why can't he change it? But it's just, I don't know. That's the issue.
And it's like I can understand the whole paradox thing, but the thing is if he's already done it, like it's you can say parallel universe, blah 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 blah. Any number of reasons can happen. So
right.
in this, it's a fixed, like you really are traveling in a straight line in time. Okay, I can kind of understand the paradox thing, but he did ultimately change the future by doing that. Like the other guy who was driving the car is going to be racked with guilt. Like his life is going to be drastically different. So it's like you can absolutely change. Like there's no way that world is going to come out exactly the same as it did before.
I'll agree with that,
Yeah,
but I
but-
think then it changes into a conversation about like fate and like eventualities
Right.
and like all that stuff. But the real qualm I had is the same kind of concept, the paradox, the changing of everything, because he goes into the future after all of this, sees how it's gonna end up, and then he comes back to this time and says, "I'm gonna change the future." No, you
Right.
can't do
Yeah.
that. He just told you that.
Oh no,
Because
I
that-
think no. He didn't. I guess he didn't say that you can't change the past. I guess what he's specifically saying is you can't change the Emma thing specifically because Emma is the catalyst for creating time travel.
Yeah.
So if she doesn't, so I don't think. Yeah, Jeremy Irons' character doesn't explicitly say you can't change the past. It's you can't change your particular past because that is the genesis of time travel. And if that didn't happen, then time travel didn't happen. So you can never actually go back and fix it. So he can. Now, where that falls apart is that guy can read minds. So how did he not figure out that Guy Pearce was going to, pull him into the time machine and have him, fight him? That's the issue. But, I mean, we're skipping around straight to the end. But the other issue with that is they specifically mention that the Morlocks he is one of many. He calls himself an Uber Morlock. So they explain same thing that because the Earth got destroyed, a bunch of people went underground to survive, and some people survived above ground. Well, the people below ground, they basically bred themselves to have some people with higher intelligence, some people with superior strength, who were basically like worker ants kind of thing. And those are the generic warlocks that we saw. So he mentions that he is one of many Uber Morlocks around the world. Right? Now, it's possible he's lying, but he specifically mentions that he is one of several.
Yeah.
And that if the Uber Morlock within like a colony is killed, the regular Morlocks are too stupid. Like, all they know is to hunt, that they would overhunt and they would ultimately get extinct because they would kill all the food. Yet, so here, he kills the Uber Morlock and then goes into the future, and now like the world's completely destroyed, but there are Morlock caves fucking like every 10 feet. So how can you have it both ways? It doesn't really make sense. So then he goes back in time and decides to like sabotage his time machine to basically make like a nuclear weapon, like a nuclear time weapon. Because like when it explodes,
that was so dumb. That pissed me off so much.
Actually, I kind of get it. I don't mind that. Like, I kind of
unleashed a burst of time. Is that what?
Yeah, it just sent
but
like.
Why would it be only through there? Wouldn't it be like a circle, a sphere? I don't.
Well, I think it was, but the problem is like it didn't. It went through. It traveled through the cracks. So I don't know if you know anything about physics, Double D, but for an object in motion stays in motion unless something changes it, right?
Okay,
so
but what about time? The time is not an object.
No, well, it's anything. So force, really anything that has momentum that's moving, is going to keep moving that direction until something stops. So I guess you can say that time. We don't really know the exact what it is, but it's safe to say it was traveling through the cave. But once again, he only destroyed one colony, so it's not like the Morlocks are gone. They're just gone from that immediate area.
Yeah.
And also, like, the time energy went through cracks and everything like that. So it's like, it could have, like, done... we don't know anything about, like, is it radiation? Like, maybe he just gave every single one of the Eli, the humans, fucking cancer. We don't know anything about time travel. Is it safe? Is there any kind of radiation? He could be, like... He could have, like... His sperm could be super fucked up, and now he's gonna go bang Samantha Mumba and create, like, fucked up kids. We don't know.
Create the Morlocks.
You're right. So, yeah, there are a couple pretty big flaws with the new one.
Oh, yeah. But it's just, there were so many things that just got me angry.
And the other thing that's weird is the Uber Morlock has, like, brain tissue on the outside of his head.
Oh, yeah. Oh, like,
Down his
sound
spine,
spine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I would just poke that if I was fighting him.
It looked gross.
But he was, like, super strong, too.
Yeah, he was strong. Like, he was like...
He was like Darth
and
Vader.
granted, it's Jeremy Irons. I think Jeremy Irons is
He was
rad.
so
And I think even in a bad movie, Jeremy Irons always gives a good performance. But yeah, this was a little weird. I did like Orlando Jones in this movie. Like, he does come back and he sees him. Like, they also have to, like... They don't even justify it in the original movie that they're still speaking English 800,000 years into the future. In this one, they justify it by saying that...
It's the stone language.
It's the stone language because... Which even that doesn't make sense that,
They could speak it, yeah.
They happen to be right next to the public library, where the public library used to be. And we see that the entire world got destroyed. And 800,000 years, you see that, like, literally, it goes into it goes to, like, Grand Canyon, and then fills back up to, like, jungle, and then it becomes, like, Ice Age, and then goes back down. And somehow you can still read stone 800,000 years later.
Or a supercomputer still chilling in the underground.
Yeah, the supercomputer still works, which I like it. And so it's between the supercomputer and that's where the English language still exists. But that was a little weird. We didn't talk about the weird talking rings in the first movie.
Oh, yeah.
Those were dumb. So in the first movie, the way that they get their education a little bit that they have is there's literally these rings and they spin them like a top, and then they talk. But you can tell that the recordings aren't done. They just didn't spin them hard enough, or they're not staying long enough. Like, that's a really shitty system.
I thought she was just gonna put the ring on the table, and I'm like, then it'll start talking. But she's like, she spun
Which would
it.
make sense.
And I was like, what?
Yeah, so if you don't get a good spin, then you're not going to get the
can't
whole
hear the
message.
story.
Yeah.
But then
You're
you
not
also,
worried.
if it stops, and then you have to keep spinning it, like you have to keep hearing the same part over and over again.
And you do 2 of them, it'll be like a Beyblade match. It's just-
Which history wins out?
But yeah, this movie, I mean, we just kind of really went through it.
We just went to the end and tore it apart.
Yeah, because it does fall apart. Like I don't know.
They're just.
I do think
They're
he
just. Ugh.
to justify him going so far into the future to ask his question. I do think they should have shown Emma die maybe at least one more time.
Oh yeah, definitely. Just
Because-
to solidify his theory.
Yeah. And now, granted, I get not wanting to see your fiance die over and over and over again, but to at least have it happen another way, just can you be like, oh shit, maybe this is fate. Or maybe he goes back to his drawing board after watching her die like a second time, or I guess it would be a third time. He goes and he's like, oh, my math is off, but I don't know where else to go, like kind of thing. And then he goes to the future. But yeah, he kind of just gives up really easy. And then he gets over her really fast and is like, I'm just going to bang Samantha Mumba.
yeah,
Yeah.
that because technically it was like
Because it was
just
hours.
hours.
later.
It's just
Yeah.
hours.
Well, so it's like, I mean, technically, it had been like 4 years or something like that since she died.
Oh, that's right.
So
Well,
yeah, it takes him 4
Not
years.
from the
to
second time he saw her die.
No, and then but
Because he was madly in love with her. Still.
right. So you go.
Wait, he's been
and let's
sitting in
say
the time machine for 4 years? I missed that.
No, it
was
took him 4
from
years to build the
first
time
machine.
To build the time machine.
and then he goes back. She dies, and then he goes into the future, and also like this one, it's safe to assume that it plays the same rules that if you go into the future, he just disappears. Which at the end of the movie, we find out that they're just like Robert Baratheon and the maid is just like, well, wherever he goes, I hope he's happy, kind of thing. But we don't see a future Alex, which that makes sense. But when he goes back in time, was there his past self?
For a second, I thought you were talking about me. I got a little confused.
No, you're Alice. Alice.
Yeah, I would think so. Because he didn't want to see himself in the park, right?
Oh, did he make a point of doing that?
I think
Wait,
so.
no.
Oh, okay, that makes
Wait,
sense. So then, what was his plan if he did save her?
Just
Was
let
he
him
just
be
going to
alive.
stay there and kill his other self, or was he going to go back to the future, and then just
Well, maybe he's gonna go back to the future and hope that she's there.
right? So I guess he does that, but then you have
Then
the
he doesn't
same.
have a time machine.
Then you have the same issue that you have with Marty McFly, where Marty McFly, when he goes back to 1985, which the
McFly?
whole Back to the Future, honestly, as much as I love that movie, it's one of my favorite
it's
movies.
Your kids.
No, not that,
oh,
Alice. The issue he has is he goes from like his parents have like a super shitty life, like they're not happy. His dad's a bitch, and then so he like fixes it, and then he comes back, and they're in the exact same house. His siblings are clearly like everything else is the same. Like his parents had sex at the exact same time, in the exact same position, and climaxed at the exact same time. So that way, the exact same sperm and the exact same egg worked out. You know, the genetics of it and the timing doesn't really make sense. But the big issue is the timeline is so different. Like his brother's successful, his parents are successful. Marty McFly has the memories of his shitty life, and all of a sudden he has a better life. Everyone would be like, what the fuck is your problem? How do you not know anything about anything? It would be the same thing. You would travel back into, 4 years into the future to assume his life, and maybe he has kids and he's not going to know his kids or anything like that. Or it's safe to assume that he probably hasn't had sex with Emma because that was a proper timeline, when you didn't do that. Well, then when he comes back to the future, that assuming that they got married, within a few months, that's like 3.5, 4 years of like having sex with his wife, and then he's gonna go and have sex with his wife for the first time. She's gonna be like, dude, you suck at this. What happened?
You just came.
Did you forget everything?
You don't remember how to have sex? You don't remember what I like? I like it when you pull my hair and bite me.
No, that's
He's not gonna know
That's
that.
the first one. That's the first one.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he's not gonna know how to please his wife. He's just it's an absurd
Glad you thought
example.
about this, Mike.
What?
I'm really glad you thought about this.
Well, I just thought of that. I was just spitballing it. But my whole point is, with these time travel movies, if you go into the past and change something and then you come back, you're gonna be looked at as a crazy person because you're not gonna have any idea what the fuck has happened.
What happens to what happens to yourself? Does he just phase out and then you just take over?
So one of the things, and this is like one of the things where Days of Future Past, with the weird time travel, where basically that time travel was just Wolverine's consciousness going back into his past body. Yeah. But I think when he came back, he kind of had like, he struggled, and unfortunately it didn't really go into Logan or whatever, but I think he had both memories.
Yeah, he did. But he was losing the old memories.
Yeah.
As he went
and
forward.
So that would kind of almost make sense if that was the case in time travel movies. Like, I had in my head, if they ever decided to do like a fourth Back to the Future movie, kind of what I thought would be an interesting thing is with Marty McFly going back in time so many times and fucking up his timeline, he goes crazy because he has like 3 lifetimes worth of memories. And he goes crazy and just tries to like fuck shit up. And then Tom Holland is his son and has to work with Doc Brown to like fix the timeline that his dad fucked up from going crazy. But yeah, it doesn't. Time travel is weird. Time travel movies, there's always weird shit that goes on.
Can't wait till we invent time travel.
That's such a bad idea.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
there are theories that time travel already exists and that God, who was I talking to? Somebody I know. I'm not gonna dox this. I'm not gonna say who it was, but somebody that I know very, very well has this whole thing where they think that basically AWOL soldiers from the future as punishment get sent back in time. And the punishment's supposed to be, well, you're used to all this crazy technology, and it would be like us getting sent back to medieval times. It would be like super boring. We would hate it, right?
Dog,
I think that would be, I'll be all right with that.
It would be terrible. First off, going back in time, you would not have the immunities and the antibodies to survive the diseases back then. You would get fucked. Same thing if you go to the future, you wouldn't have the antibodies for like the super virus and the super herpes and the super HIV and the
super herpes,
super everything. Because, well, yeah, because like the bacteria and the viruses are going to continue evolving.
That's what happened in War After the, what was it, War of the Worlds or something like that?
Exactly.
With the fucking aliens.
Ultimately, if you're not used to it, you'll die. So that's absolutely what happens. So time travel really doesn't work. But yeah, this person I know honestly thinks that, I don't know if they honestly think this anymore, but there was a period of time where they honestly thought that there are time travelers who've come from the future, but it was specifically like AWOL soldiers. And I'm like, that's the dumbest thing in the world, because if you were going to send somebody back in time, you wouldn't want to send like a soldier back in time who's trained to do shit, because they could change your timeline.
Yeah, just like the Terminator.
Yeah. Like, don't even get me started on Terminator. How could in T2 could the T1000 travel back in time if you're only able to transport organic matter? Well, the whole point of the Terminator having skin is one to blend in, but also it
send
allows
them back. I know. I love this franchise
to go back.
But they never explained it.
Yeah. I think we're rambling. I think we're good. I think we just need to ask the question, did this need to be remade? And was this the remake that needed to happen?
You know, I used to think this movie was good, but watching it this time, I fucking hated the ending, and just like it ruined the movie for me.
I still enjoyed it, but I did enjoy the 1960s one more.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, I think I can echo your guys' feelings. I like the original more than the new one.
If they just ended it differently, if they ended it the same way the first one ended, I'd be fine with it.
Right. He's all creepy.
Well, the thing that's
fucking time bomb
weird is they put a ton of money into the second one. So the sequel, like the newer one, cost like $80 million or something like that. It made like $123 million. So realistically, it probably, with promotional stuff, and that's just American box office. So when you take in worldwide box office, it probably made a decent amount of money. There was some weird stuff with this movie. So at the time, the time machine itself was the biggest, most expensive prop ever made for a movie.
I gotta say that the 2002 time machine, I really love that design.
Yeah, it was a cool design, and they did keep elements from the original, like the hand, like the throttle is removable, kind of thing,
with the crystal on the head.
Other thing that was interesting with this movie is apparently Guy Pearce is so consistent with his acting, which, you know, you can look at this as like a positive, but also in a way it could be a negative because it doesn't really give editors multiple things to work with. But apparently his line delivery was so consistent that they actually would just pull audio from one take and then put it over video from another take.
Damn, that's impressive.
Like Yeah, so apparently he's that consistent. He can do that. He actually broke his ribs doing this movie.
Did he
which
have
is
like? Is he probably a Marlon Brando? Did he have like mothballs in his like cheek or something?
No, that's just his face.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's just his face.
No, I was thinking about it. I'm like, he looks a little different, but then I went and like online, I looked at like him in Iron Man 3 and Memento, and I was like, nope, that's just him.
That's just him. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I gotta let me just look this up.
He's just Australian. I think he's Australian.
Cool.
Anyway, thanks for listening to the podcast. Check out MDXpods.com, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. For all of our updates, please check out our other great podcasts, Ruin My Childhood. And once again, please support us on Patreon, patreon.com/MDXpods. You get early access to all of our shows, which is pretty cool. There's other kind of things that we do on there as well. If you want something free, go to audibletrial.com/MDXpods and get a free book on us.
Yay!
Free stuff is the best stuff.
All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Don't travel in time.